Hey everybody, welcome to On the Edge. We're so excited about our guest today. Good morning, Bennett.
Good morning.
How is Pride Month going for you?
It's a bit blurry already.
Sorry,
No,
Bennett's been celebrating, so
it started. In Seattle, it started last night. So
big celebration.
it starts with a big celebration, and it's just. I mean, you hear from people. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna go like 10 parties tomorrow, and another 10 parties. I said, really? Good luck. No, anyways, no, it's fun. It's fun. The excitement, the excitement, and the joy, and everything on the hill, Capitol Hill, which is where most of the activities and for Pride happen, are great. And so,
Is it a good turnout in Seattle?
oh yeah, it's probably I think next to New York and San Francisco, we have the third largest parade.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I've only been to a couple of celebrations, and it's always felt like just a big movement, everybody together. But in Seattle and these places where it's huge,
Yeah.
do they segregate? I mean, is there a section for the drag queens? Is there a section for the trans community?
They're all fully integrated. And, I think the interesting thing is how much Pride is becoming very commercial. So, with the hype of RuPaul's Drag Race, like we have at least 20 of RuPaul drag girls here in Seattle for the celebration. And then they have tons of musicians, or if anybody's familiar with Orville Peck, he just announced that he's pulling out and kind of staying away from getting some mental health break, he said. So it was fascinating because they were able to get Betty who's a really popular pop artist, to come in last minute, like literally this week. He pulled out, they got her to come in. I said, wow, how did you pull that one off? But
if I remember correctly, Orville Peck was on the finale of season 15 of RuPaul. Okay. And he performed with, I can't think of his name.
Leland, who's a producer. Yeah.
Okay, that's right. All right.
I don't know how I remember all this with my morning blur.
It's amazing. It's amazing what
when you have to
practice a little bit more discretion next time, or remember the saying we talked about.
I know the saying. It's gonna repeat itself. Don't worry.
Okay. Well, some things never change, thankfully. Yeah. And some things do. With that segue.
For sure.
Sorry. I love our guest so much today. Dr. Elijah, thank you for joining us today. Dr. Elijah Nicholas, and he has an amazing story, and I'm going to let him share it. Thanks, Dr. Elijah, for joining us.
Thank you, Bennett and Rayanne, for having me. Thank you. I'm just excited to be here. This great Pride, what is today? June 23rd. Yes, yeah. I'm happy to be here. This week has been a bit of a blur to me. It's been a lot going on, and we'll get into some of that. But I'm Dr. Elijah Nicholas. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And I'm a young man from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, born and raised. I live in Atlanta, Georgia now. I spent, up until a couple of years ago, I spent the majority of my life in the U.S. military. I could say before that I spent over half of my life, 24 years, 10 months, and 8 days between the U.S. Army and the Air Force. I retired as Lieutenant Colonel in 2012. And life has just been amazing for me ever since. So that's pretty much who I am.
24 and a half years in the military.
Yes.
Well, first, thank you for your service. I really cannot thank you enough. I know Bennett feels the same way. We really appreciate the veteran community, and of course, the young men and young women that are out there fighting the good fight, even if it's just in their hometown or wherever they might be. There's this line from, and I just watched this scene from A Few Good Men, the opportunity to lie under the blanket of freedom every night, and I feel like we are protected. Of course, now there are questions about wars and policing and authority and all of that. So I'm sure that is impacting the military today. And So I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about your story. We invited you to be here on the edge with us because we like to talk about things that are maybe not edgy to everybody, but are edgy to some people, and help them become a little bit more informed, have the opportunity to ask questions and understand. And also what we like to say is the unlearning of, oops, we lost him. He'll be back. To say the unlearning of,
there he is.
There he is. Let's let him back in the room. Okay, you don't get to keep leaving and like that.
I don't know. You said policing and authority, and my phone was like,
I'm out of here.
There we go. Wow. Okay, so we would love for you to share a little bit more about your story and how, after so many years in the military, and then, making a decision to do this. So I'm going to let you introduce it and help us. And anybody that's paying attention or watching now, please feel free to ask questions. I am monitoring the chat, and Dr. Elijah is happy to answer any questions, and be respectful. We'll all be respectful.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, because I want y'all to know that there are no questions off limits for me. I have been asked some of the most interesting questions, and then I've been asked questions that people thought wouldn't make a difference, but made a world of a difference for the entire viewing audience. So please know that I'm an open book. My core values are transparency, authenticity, and integrity, and that's how I live my life. So if you have a question, I'm happy to answer it. Speaking about the service, I have to be honest and say that this past week, actually probably over the last 2 to 3 weeks, was the first time in my life, in this lifetime, that I have ever considered what it would look like to leave the United States. And, I say that with the caveat that I absolutely love my country. Obviously, I served my country for almost 25 years. And the tension that is going on now really gave me opportunity to pause and have a flash of what would it look like if I left the United States. And I say that because as a African-American transgender man, I started my transition in 2017-18 between mental health therapy and hormone replacement therapy. And I'm an advocate. And so being an advocate, we are on pretty much 24/7. And this week was the first time in a while where I had to turn off. Literally, I had to turn my phone off, and I had to just step back, because when you're an advocate, when you're a healer, when you're a mentor, the people that you're mentoring are going through things too. And this was really the first time that I was like, what would it look like if Elijah left the United States? And I'll be honest and say I don't like that feeling, because I served my country so that I could live here too, right? And so, but I did. I enjoyed serving in the military, and decided to transition after, a few years after I retired from the military in 2012. I lived life in the closet as a lesbian for the entire time that I was in the military. I joined when I was 17 years old, and I remember the moment that I signed the paper. One of the last questions on there was, "Are you a homosexual?" And that was in 1987, and I still can't believe that question was on the application. And of course, I lied, because I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to see, and experience the world through the military. And so I lied, and that lie caused me a lot of pain over the next 25 years, serving in the military.
That is incredible. I mean, really, really incredible. And I want you to know that you're not alone in that thought that you had this week. I come from a long line military family. Grandfather served in World War II, uncle that was a Green Beret. I mean, I have a really strong affinity for this country. My mom is a flag. I mean, there are flags in every part of her house. She waves flags all year long. She was a director in theater, and at the end of every show, in the finale, somebody pulled a flag out. I mean, every single show. So flag waving family. And it's been the last month or two that my husband and I have actually talked about what would it look like for us to move to Italy, or what. I mean, because of the horrible tension, the terrible things that are said and done, the misinformation, like we talked about before we went on the air, the misinformation that's out there. And so we really appreciate you coming on the show and talking. Let's talk through this, and let's talk about some of the misinformation. And so I find it interesting that you say you were in the closet for 24 years.
Yes.
Does that mean nobody knew? Nobody suspected? Or do you think they suspected and nobody talked about it?
Well, they may have suspected, given that I wore a buzz cut and never had a husband. So they may have suspected.
Yeah.
I served during the Don't Ask, Don't Tell administration. And so it was don't ask, don't tell, right? But that caused anxiety and tension as well, because if you went to the local gay club downtown and you saw someone, or you saw cars sitting outside across the way, you never knew if somebody was watching you or if you were going to see somebody that you knew. So, it was, when I think back on it, I'm like, how in the world did I do that for 25 years? And I can tell you how I did it. I did it through alcohol. I did it through, self-medicating, and I did it through a lot of relationships, because I just, didn't have the mental capacity to just lie every single day and not self-soothe myself in some kind of way. So that's how I did it.
Did your family know?
Yes, my family knew. I came out to my mom when I was 14 years old. And my story with that is, I come from a Christian family, Southern Baptist background. And at 14 years old, I walked in the kitchen, and my mom, if you can picture, there's a wood round table with 4 chairs around it and a Bible in the middle of the table. And my mom, God bless her, I love her so much. She was speaking to me from the space that she was at that time. And, it was a very heavy conversation. And she asked me if I like girls. And my mother was and is my best friend. And so I told the truth. And so I left that table feeling liberated because I told the truth. But I also felt like I wanted to end everything, because based on my conversation with my mother and the teachings that we believed in at the time, I was doomed to hell. And what was the point in living? So obviously I didn't make that decision. But one of the reasons I do what I do is because think of all the kids who don't have that ability or that fortitude to make that decision to go on. Trans individuals have one of the highest suicide rates, our youth do. And so unfortunately, many don't make that decision. They make a very different decision.
So I have a question, and maybe you've answered this, maybe it's a little bit too personal, and you can tell me if it is, although you did say there's nothing off.
Yes.
Yeah, I can ask whatever I want. So when you told your mom,
yes,
and you were 14, right? Had you already experimented? Had you kissed another girl? Was that feeling cemented for you? I want to ask these questions for people who think, that are thinking about the grooming part of it, that, and which is a big concern for some individuals who are anti-trans. They feel like individuals are groomed into this or into a homosexual lifestyle.
Right. Misinformation. Right.
Misinformation. Right.
So every person's journey is different, right? But I will share what my journey was, because I had 2 coming outs. In fact, right, I came out as trans in 2017 to my mom, and then I came out when I was 14, whatever year that was, to my mom, right? I can tell you that when I grew up as a little girl, I knew as a little girl something was different with me. So I knew, I would say probably around, I can remember about 4 to 5 years old, as I started seeing my brothers and cousins use the bathroom and play male sports and do, things like that. I was like, I'm not supposed to be over here doing these female assigned duties, right? So I knew then, but I didn't know how to articulate being trans, right? In 2nd grade, I had a crush, not on my male teacher, but on my female teacher. I remember I had the biggest crush on my teacher, right? And so I had my first girlfriend that year when I was 14 years old. She's like, yeah, it's truth. He's telling the truth. But I had my first girlfriend at 14 years old, which is how my mother actually found out. She found some letters between the two of us.
Oh.
So, you know, what nobody grooming me. I knew at a very young age.
No 14-year-old wants mom to find love letters. I'm just
no.
My girl in SoCal, I didn't want my mom finding letters either. So.
No. And so you know, I it's unfortunate that people say that you know, even make a parallel between grooming and a young child coming to his or herself or to themselves, right? That's very unfortunate, because the reality is, as children, even when we think about from a spiritual perspective, a faith perspective, we're not born into religion. We're born as spiritual beings, right? And so then religion is taught to us as children, right? Some of us later on in life, right? So that's not everybody's experience. And so we're not born into thinking hate. We're not born into those things, right? We know who we are. My point is, we know who we are when we come into this world. It's the societal norms and all the dogma and the doctrine that's put around on children. Absolutely. And then we start straying away from who we really are, which was my case. And now, you know, midlife, I remember who I was when I came into this world, and have since affirmed my gender and affirmed who I am.
So I want to dive a little bit deeper in this, because since we're talking about grooming and everything, there's also another vein of thought that is, you were probably molested as a child, right? You were probably molested, or you were raped, and it made you do this, or you didn't have a dad, or, you know, there are so many different things. So were you molested as a child?
I was molested as a child, and my dad was an absent asshole, excuse my language, dad. He was. That is not the case for every trans or gay person. Right. You know, I cannot, I'll be 100 to say, I cannot say that didn't contribute to who I am today. What I say is, every single experience that I've ever had contributes to who I am today.
That's what everyone should be saying. Who we are, how we react to other people, how we respond to situations, all happens and changes and evolves over the course of our life. And it has everything to do with everything that's ever happened to us.
Absolutely.
So you can't just pull something out and say that one thing is what caused it to happen, because it's all the layers together.
Right. And, you know, I would say to that also, Rayanne, is that for me, the mental health journey that I've been on, I would think, now I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but I would think, of all the mental health therapy that I've taken, if my gender dysphoria, if you will, were related to the molestation and the absence of my father, my mental health journey would have helped me mature beyond that, right? Yeah. That has not been the case. I still am who I am, and I have explored to the nth degree to make sure that I am who I am.
So I wasn't molested, but I was assaulted as a child, as a 12-year-old, and I'm a straight white woman. So, I mean, I don't think assault or a molestation is limited to, and the result is, right? So I think we have to be really careful in making these statements or claims. Absolutely. And then not really exploring everything there. I mean, you just can't make this general statement or claim. Absolutely. So 2017, you transitioned or started the process.
Yes.
How long did the process take for you?
So I'm still transitioning, right? Okay. I'll say that because yes, I think we all transition every single day, right? But my initial phase, as I like to call it, was about 6 months of mental health therapy. And I'm grateful for the VA. If I had my way, everybody would go through mental health before they transitioned, and everybody would serve in the military. But because I probably will never be president of the United States, that may or may not happen. But I am so grateful that I took time to do, or that they mandated that I do that mental health therapy, because that helped me to stand before you today and say, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt who I am, right? And there is no one who can convince me otherwise, whether it's done through medical research or through a general conversation. I know who I am. I don't, those things, they are what they are, right? But I know who I am and what I've come to this earth to do. So after I finished mental health therapy, I came out to my mom again, you know, in the beginning of 2018 into 2017. And then in July of 2018, which is, wow, almost 5 years now, I started what was then called HRT, hormone replacement therapy. Now it's called HT, hormone treatment.
Okay, so it's an ongoing journey for you.
Yes.
And there's something that I've thought a lot about, and I've actually written about this as I've engaged with other trans individuals and have become more involved with the community, a louder ally to the community. And one of those things is that I sought gender affirming care. You know, I went and got a boob job because I wanted to feel more like the woman that I imagined myself to be inside my head. So sometimes I like to bring that up. Well, did you get individuals that I know got a nose job, or I've had a facelift, you know, or are taking Viagra, or, you know, I mean, there are things that we do even as straight people. Imagine that, to make us feel more like the gender we identify as. Right. And so I think it's really important that we remind individuals that gender affirming care is not just assigned to the trans community.
Absolutely.
I go get a massage to feel more like a soft woman, because by the end of the week I am, you know, angry and ready to tear somebody's head off. So I really feel like we need to continue to identify those ways that how we feel more like who we identify with. Right. I mean, as a member of the military, you have things that you do that are part of your identity, right? You probably have a flag somewhere in your home. You probably have medals somewhere in your home. You have these things that remind you of who you are.
Right. Absolutely.
And so I feel like there is such a block and a true bias. I mean, a true bias, not, I mean, somebody has shared misinformation. That bitch shared misinformation. And how do you, when somebody says something that you know is false, how do you respond? And what is the best way for an ally? I mean, I feel like I'm part of the Pride community because of the marches I've been on, and because it's my niece, it's my friend, it's, you know, it's my aunt, you know. So I don't want it to be misconstrued that only you can do this. Right. How can we support you? But what do you say? How do you?
That's what I do first, is take a deep breath. Right.
I feel like you're constantly educating, right?
Constantly educating, you know, constantly educating. And I realize that is a part of my purpose. And so I've come to accept that. But as I said a few minutes ago, sometimes it gets overwhelming, educating all the time.
And I know that Black people feel the same way. I know that I've heard this from my Black friends. They feel like, can't you Google?
Yes.
I mean, look it up. I don't have to teach everybody.
Right. And you know, I think that there's times, obviously, when educating is important, right? And then there's times when you refer people to Google, right? And my job is just discerning between the two, right? That's part of my job. But when I'm talking with someone who we may disagree on the trans experience, I always offer that I understand their perspective, I may not agree with their perspective, but I understand their perspective, whether it's in, like I said, in agreement with mine or not. And I try to educate from a position of commonality. What do you and I have in common? Much of my impact is made on a one-on-one basis, right? With a person at a grocery store, with a person that I'm acting with in a film, who doesn't know that I'm trans, and oh, by the way, I'm trans, and there's like a light bulb that comes on, right? And so I educate really usually through the lens of love, right? Well, not usually, but always through the lens of love. I lead with love. I don't, I have this T-shirt on today because I'm on your amazing show, and I wore the T-shirt actually over to one of the stores, and I got some stares, of course, because I usually don't wear this out, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. I should probably wear this for the rest of the day, right?
Absolutely.
I love it.
But that's what I do. I lead with love, and I educate through the lens of love. What our allies can do. You said something a few minutes ago, and the word just jumped out at me. Literally, no pun intended. But you said loud. You say it loud. Like that is what we need right now. Is we need people to be loud. We need cisgender straight people to be loud. And proud, and not performative, not just during Pride Month. Actually, June is probably my least least busy month. I am working July through May, right? Because and there's no that's no shun against anybody who only works during the month of June, but my point is to our allies. Have the individuals who are a part of this experience to educate you and educate those around you and educate your organizations and educate your corporations and your faith-based organizations. Because this, to me, this performative thing where you donate $10,000 in the month of June and the rest of the year, we don't hear from you. The second thing is accountability. We have to hold our government accountable. That comes from the LGBTQIA plus community and our allies, right? I saw something online the other day, and there was this discussion on the HRC IG channel about holding President Biden accountable, and I'm all for that. Especially as a military retired veteran, absolutely, we have to hold him accountable to what he said he was going to do, specifically concerning the Equality Act, right? So, and third, we cannot assume the vote, right? That is an unfair assumption that all minorities or all LGBTQI plus individuals are going to vote one way because we fall in a certain category.
Right. And I mean, you can't make that assumption of a straight white woman either.
Absolutely not.
Like every other straight white woman, right?
Absolutely not.
It's an interesting time because I've never felt embarrassed by my race or my identity. And to just see video after video of straight white women, right, who are just horrible. I mean, it's just, I cannot believe some of the things that come out of people's mouths, some of the things that they think, and then go ahead and feel like they should say what they're thinking because it's just not. Bennett and I are trying really hard to not say certain words.
You're doing great.
I'm not talking about glorious swear words. I'm talking about words that that end up offending other people. And one of those words is the word crazy. And it's easy to see something, that behavior, and say, that's just crazy or that's insane, So it's very, I'll just say it's like a world apart from how I feel, how I think. And I'm kind of dumbfounded how when somebody is raised to understand the all giving love of Jesus Christ, who they consider their ultimate hero, their Lord and Savior, their Messiah, that they would feel like they could use that, either religion or something that somebody's made up, and use that to denigrate and to abuse and to kill. and to joy in the harm that can come to individuals of any community, right? It's not just the trans community or the drag community. We're talking about any community that this has happened to over the course of world history, that are abused behind using a Bible, right? Using the Bible or the words that they, I mean, it also happens in other extreme religions, of course, but Christianity, I mean, we can follow the history of it. And I at one time identified as a Christian, and I just can't, to be embarrassed to say that, or to be embarrassed to wave a flag because it might align me with somebody else, or somebody else's thoughts. That's a hard place to be. And absolutely. One of the things that I love about you is that you're so willing to remind people that you don't know what you don't know, and that you're willing to share your story so often and write a children's book that helps kids, right? Helps kids understand, because I don't think kids would have a problem. It's more for parents to
Right.
Kids understand, because I remember being a tomboy and thinking, I don't want to wear the frilly dress. Can't I just, and having that gender identity forced on me, right? I mean, we're forcing gender identity on children all the time. Well, I love what Target is doing now, and I know that there's a lot that's happening with Target, but I remember when they first started mixing up boys and girls toys. Instead of having this boy toy section and the girl toy section, they started mixing them all up. And I really love that. And so I hope that they can come back. Actually, right now is a really good time to buy stock in Target, because they're not going away and stock is low. So go buy. That's my tip for today.
Thanks for that tip.
There's a pro tip.
Pro tip: when a company is struggling that's been around for a very long time, go buy stock.
They're not going anywhere.
They're not going anywhere. So, how do you, I mean, I know it's got to be really tiring, but how do you, as Dr. Elijah, just keep going?
For one, I stop, right? I stop sometimes. And yesterday, a couple of days ago, I had to stop. My body was like, stop. Wow. And so a couple of things that you said, if I may, I want to respond to. And first of all, I want to encourage you to not be embarrassed, because the reality is there are people in every race, religion, ethnicity that say things that are harmful to others, right? But I appreciate you saying that, and I understand that. But the reality is you're not responsible for what they say and what they do. And my opinion is you're not in, and I know that some people may not agree with me on this, but you are not responsible even for the history of what has happened. Right. All we have is today, in this present moment, and what we do going forward. So I wanted to say that. The second thing that I want to say is I, as an ordained minister, as a Christian, as a person who was raised Southern Baptist, I understand how people can use the Bible as a weapon. I don't justify it, but there are many examples of exactly what's happening today in a different format in the Bible. So I understand how people can read a text and take that text literally and extrapolate what they want and then try to convey that. There's a couple of things. One, we forget often about the separation of church and state. That, like, we could stop there. None of this would even be a discussion.
That's exactly right.
Stopped right there and stopped at the separation of church and state, because everything that I've heard this week in the testimonies about the Equality Act come from a place of morals and values, and not what the Constitution says, right? It doesn't matter what your religious belief is, what your religious foundation is. What does the Constitution says? It says that there should be equality for all people. We could stop there when we separate, if we were to separate church and state, right? So how do I keep going? I do it a lot through meditation and prayer, right? I also wanted to say before I move on to that is I stopped pastoring in 2017, just before my gender transition, when I started hormone replacement therapy, because I could no longer preach just Jesus. I can no longer preach, the core and live the core values that I have. So for me, more than Christianity, more than Jesus, it's the Christ consciousness, right? When I think of really what Christ did and would do, it's a consciousness, and it's not the literal interpretation that many extrapolate and use as a weapon. And that's what I do. For me, it comes down to love and leading with love. I feel, since we're talking about Jesus, I feel that Jesus led with love. And that is the piece that is missing, whether we're on Capitol Hill or here in Georgia, taking gender affirming care from trans kids.
Yeah.
Well, that's truly servant leadership. When we talk about the middle leader, the 360-degree leader, somebody who's an ally. But I have my own groups that I belong to as a late in life diagnosed ADHDer, right? So I have this new place where I am. I find it really interesting that when there's such a push for servant leadership, empathy in the workplace, but people are not, they won't be loud. They won't be loud to help educate and get past that misinformation. And it's so tragic to me that we cannot see what's happening, that you really cannot see what's happening, and that you can't align yourself with this and feel empowered by the love, right? The love can be so empowering. And one thing that I've seen this week, and I wanted to ask both you and Bennett about it. Bennett is actually the one that woke me up I've been to drag shows and I loved it, but I never got into RuPaul's Drag Race, and he got me hooked on it, and I watched it for 15 seasons in a year and a half time, right? So I love it, and I love learning about these different communities and finding out that we have so much more in common.
Oh gosh,
what we don't have in common. I love being in the workroom and listening to what happens in the untucked portion of but I've witnessed a couple of things, and even on LinkedIn, where the LGBTQIA plus community, that community sometimes disowns the T and the Q part, if Q stands for queen and not queer. So they have some in that community, and I've only seen it really on the gay side. So what is that about? And I wonder, did you get a backlash when you decided to come out as trans? Did the lesbian community that you were part of, was there a backlash? Was there an understanding? Did somebody say, I knew that was going to happen? Tell me a little bit about your story.
Sure.
In that regard.
That's a good one.
Sure. So there's a book called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Frele. And in this book, the author talks about how an oppressed people, when they become free, they become the oppressor, right? And we've seen that numerous times, right? From races to ethnicities to gender, women. When the oppressed gets free, then they somehow forget the oppression that has been experienced, and then they become the oppressor, right? So it's all about power, right? In my opinion. Second thing, I think personally that the T shouldn't even be a part of the LGBTQIA plus.
Really?
And the reason that I think that, or the reason that I feel this way, is because when we're talking about the trans experience, we're talking about gender identity. We're not talking about a sexuality.
That's right.
The lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, even pansexual, those are all sexualities. But when we're talking about gender identity and being either trans or non-binary, we're talking about gender identity and gender expression. And so when I think of my gender expression, now I identify as pansexual, right? So I would fall in that alphabet. But as far
I was going to ask you, so are you a lesbian now, or is
No,
because your identity has changed?
No, so I identify as my
As
first
man.
my first step was identifying as a heterosexual man, right?
Okay.
And as I evolved along my journey, right, I'm still transitioning, still evolving, still elevating my consciousness. I found out what this thing called pansexual is, and I was like, oh, that's who I am. I am attracted to a person's energy and their mind, more so than I am their gender. And then I also identify as polyamorous, meaning that I don't think that there is any one person that can live with Dr. Elijah for the rest of his life.
Yeah. Well,
that's my version of it.
For most people, I mean, when you look at the history of love and loss,
Absolutely.
most people are not just, they don't confine that. Now, God bless them if they're able to do that. But I don't know very many people that were with the same person for the entirety of their life. So
absolutely. And we have, I think that, well, we could have a whole nother show about polyamory.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we can.
But we have multiple relationships that fulfill things that we need,
Absolutely.
to have fulfilled. Right. And so that's something that I've grown to a space of. And to answer your question, I absolutely was shunned by the lesbian and gay and bisexual community.
I'm sorry to hear
when I came out. It was one of the most painful experiences that I ever had
that.
from a circle of friends who also happened to be religious friends at the time, ministers. And it was a horrible, horrible experience. Now I realize that we were all in a space of ignorance. We didn't know what it meant. We didn't know what it was. But the one thing that we should have had in common was love, right? And that didn't exist for me at the time, which is another reason why I do what I do and trying to educate people so that experience never happens to another trans or non-binary person when they're coming out to their safe circle of friends.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I've always considered when I thought about the Pride community was, it's so painful. It's so painful. Why? That tells me that it's not a choice, right? I just feel like, why would anybody choose this kind of pain? Why would anybody choose to be shunned and hurt and you know, banned from parts of society? Why would anybody choose this? I mean, it's choosing to go into the lion's den, right? I mean, truly, it is choosing that. And so that's something that helped me, somebody who was raised a good little Mormon girl, right? And we know the oppression that's taken place against the Pride community within the Mormon community. And I just was also a member of the theater community. And I learned more, and I've said this, I've learned more from my theater community and my own children than I ever learned from the religion that I grew up in and from my parents. And maybe that's how it's supposed to be. Maybe we're supposed to learn more from the next generation. But do we? Can we take that knowledge and apply it? Before we get too far into it, and I could talk to you. We could talk to you for hours. I know, Bennett. Before we jump into our next topic, do you have a comment, or are you just enjoying this? And
no, I'm enjoying the conversation. I mean, it's, you know, and as I reflect on, you know, this overall, like, where else do we need to be working on to really help the trans community continue to be included, more inclusive? So, for example, you know, my side hustle, side gig is I'm a resident manager for an apartment building. And so certainly just recently, you know, without any knowledge on my part, you know, a trans tenant applied, and we went through a pretty tense conversation because, you know, it's pretty black and white how organizations make decisions on who to rent to and who not to rent to. And the reality is that the property management couldn't find any records of the individual because they hadn't, you know, they hadn't built their credit score.
As they're in their new name.
Under their new identity. And so, you know, it took us, you know, so like there's some things like, one of the things I went back and said, we got to, add to our like application form. Do you go under a different name? Because we would have never known unless the individual actually told us,
right.
Oh, I'm trans. I said, okay, that explains a lot of what we're not finding.
Right.
It's like even like this whole rental market, like even building credit and all that type of stuff. It's like it's all built on identity, and how do you we have to find a better way to not have to stumble into a very stressful conversation for both parties. It's not and such. So
interesting things that you don't think about that accompany the journey. That's really interesting. Okay, thank you for bringing that up, Bennett. That's important, and we could talk again a whole nother show about this, but I want to dive in for our last 15 minutes and really allow Dr. Elijah to tell us about his most current project. I'm so excited to learn about this. 100 Black Trans Men Inc.
Yes.
Take it away.
Wow. So before I respond to that, may I respond to Bennett?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
So one of the things I wanted to say is that's an example of how companies must be intentional and do things in advance. One of the things that I always say in my talks is to create the policy before you need the policy. That's an example of this policy wasn't created before it was needed, right? The second thing is we need to pass the Equality Act because there's still 26 states where it's legal to discriminate, right? I can understand why as a trans person, why I wouldn't want to put certain things on an application because then I'm outing myself. Like, I don't feel like I need to out myself every time I apply. So I wanted to mention that, like, it's a domino effect, and I don't think that many people understand even the magnitude of the effect that the Equality Act has. So with that said, one of the things that I've started is the 100 Black Trans Men Inc. It's a nonprofit organization that is specifically for Black trans men, and it's created to equip, empower, and elevate the voices, visibility, and representation of African American men. We do that in 3 ways: through shifting our mindset, through leadership, and then through access to corporations and entities beyond our mentorship program. So I'm so excited about it. I've had an amazing response. We started with 50 applicants, ended up with 25 people to start the first phase, and we're gonna probably graduate about 18 people actually this Sunday.
Woo! Congratulations.
From phase 1. Thank you.
How can we support? Well, first, what is the intention? The ultimate intention of 100 Black trans men?
The ultimate intention is to increase awareness and visibility of Black transgender men, and specifically leaders, because I'm a leader and I'm not going to be here forever. And so I'm taking the access, the information, the resources that I have and sharing it with these individuals and creating leaders that will be out in the community. I have a 5-year strategic plan to eventually elevate some of these leaders into politics. And I'm really excited about it, because the reality is, can you name, other than Dr. Elijah Nicholas, can you name an African American trans male on, say, for example, media and television? I'll wait.
No. My
point exactly. There's 2 that I know of other than me, and that is a problem. And so that's one of the things that
I know trans women that are very vocal, and I wonder what the difference. What do you think the difference is?
Well, there's multiple layers, right? There's multiple layers. When you think about being a Black man in America, that is like the first thing. Right. So there's access, there's visibility, there's resources, all the things that Bennett just talked about in the application. Some of our folks don't have access to jobs because they haven't had money to change their name. Right. They don't have access to proper health care. So there's a plethora of information and a bunch of reasons why we need this program, right? So my intention is to create leaders to address some of these issues and then to create other leaders, right? It's kind of like, Jesus's philosophy with the 12 disciples. He couldn't do it all by himself, right? So I realized that I cannot do it by myself. And so my goal is to create other Black trans male leaders. Not that there are any out there. There are some amazing leaders who are already out there, but our program is very specific in creating leaders. Leaders specifically.
Are you bootstrapping this, or do you have funding, or what's?
I am bootstrapping in the sense of every dime that I have has gone to it. We need money. We finally got our 501c3 approved last week. So now
I saw the post. Congratulations on that. That's amazing.
Thank you. It is such a relief and such a blessing, because when I have approached companies and individuals so far, that's the first question that I get. And so now, as we begin to apply for grants, now we've got the bank account set up. So if people want to donate funds,
great. Okay.
Happy to send the budget. We've got all our ducks in a row. So I've been doing this pretty much by myself, as well as producing a film as well. So
I know, and you've got to make. So we'll have you, when we wrap up, I want you to tell us about the film and how people can purchase your book. How they can contribute to 100 trans Black men. One thing that Bennett and I have discovered over the last 2 years of us talking and doing this kind of situational uncovering of stuff, living on the edge. I feel like we live on the edge because anytime there's a topic that is getting attention, we jump out there. We're not going to talk about the submarine today, though. Sorry, not going to talk about it. I'm a little dismayed in humanity by this is all I'll say, by the jokes that were happening right away. It's
okay.
There's so much more to say. I'm not going to say it. But one thing that we have discovered is these 5 words that are so impactful for us as individuals, as allies to any other community that needs us to be loud, is how can we support you? So how can, aside from contributing, because obviously we'll do that, but how can we support 100 trans Black men and your mission to create amazing leaders, to ruin misinformation? We're going to ruin her, right? So how can we support you?
Absolutely. So there's a couple of ways. One, in our leadership program, we have a leadership series that's going to be starting in July. And so we need leaders, and they don't have to be trans leaders, but we need community leaders to teach us how they got to where they are. So I am interested in talking to leaders who would be willing to speak with our folks for about a half hour on a Sunday evening and just take their questions and answer Q&A. Secondly, if there are any job placement programs out there that I can work with for our individuals who may be in need of a job. And third, visibility, bringing our organization and or our panel as a panel virtually or physically to your organization. Right now, we are in 13 states and 16 counties. So we're all working our way around the United States.
Right.
I want to be a trans Black man.
Okay, come on.
Something my husband and I invariably, because we'll read each other news, he starts a news update for today, and he'll read like something that's on the news. And we've been reading a lot about the misinformation that's out there about the trans community. And in particular, the things that are being thrown out there haphazardly about the youth. Youth, right? And he said something so beautiful to me. I think it's probably one of the most romantic and beautiful things he's ever said to me was, we should start a school. Let's start a school for trans kids. And I just looked at him like, how do you think we're going to do? How do you think we can do that? And so I feel like what I do, what I try to do, and being loud is kind of like that. And I would love to do that. I would love to. I mean, most you two will not know this, but there was a book called Little Women, and the main character was Jo, and she started a school for boys. And it was a favorite book of mine as a kid, and read all the sequels to it. And it's always been a dream of mine to kind of do something like that. So is there a program, or is there a junior program for 100 Black trans men? Or is that something we could talk about in the future and think about? I mean, how can we support the youth that are going through this too right now? Because you didn't have that support, right? You didn't have that support as a kid. I feel like you created your own support system around you by going into the military. You surrounded yourself with protection, right? And there were probably other women, like that were like you used to be, that that were going through similar experiences as you. So you put yourself in a situation where you were protected. So how can we support the youth?
I would love to talk to you about that, because as a part of our strategic plan, the Black trans youth, male specifically, are a part of that 5-year plan. And I have one of the leaders who's matriculating through the program now, who's actually going to be responsible for building that out. So I would love for us to talk offline about that.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. I just feel I'm so empowered by all of this knowledge, right? Another thing that Ben and I talk about is curiosity, right? And staying curious.
Yes.
It aligns with unlearning, right? If you choose to think that, and I've met a lot of people in my life that say, I know all I need to know, right? They just put themselves in that place where I know what I believe is true. One, I know that I don't need to learn anything more because I already know everything, right? And 3, anything that doesn't fit in with what I know is false, a lie, misleading. What is the other thing? The conspiracy, right? I mean, instead of identifying the conspiracy within themselves, they push that out on everybody else. And so I'm really fascinated by what has happened to my brain, my heart, when I made the decision. And Bennett and I both have come to a really interesting place in our lives of letting go of things that we thought we knew. That's a true adult, is the person that can say, oh, I don't know everything. What more can I learn?
Right.
Yes.
So if you were to give advice to anybody that, let's talk a couple of things, that want to know more about the trans community, that want to be an ally. They aren't one yet, and they want to know how they can be an ally. And then also somebody that's in a place where they don't know, should I transition? I've never felt comfortable in my body. How do I get more information that isn't misinformation?
Right.
So if you have a couple of resources or a couple of things you can share, that'd be great.
Absolutely. That's a great question. I would start with the first question is to talk with someone who is trans, right? That's the best way to learn about the trans experience and understand that every trans and non-binary experience is unique. Right. But just talk to someone and allow yourself to be vulnerable and say, I don't know what I don't know.
That's what I did. That's what I did.
Absolutely.
And so often when somebody says, they protest and say, it's wrong. Have you talked to anyone?
Right.
Have you had a conversation? Have you talked to your gay friends? And in the back of my head, I'm like, they don't have any gay friends.
Yeah.
Have you talked to your blood friends? They don't have any blood friends.
Yeah.
So you have to go out and expand your community.
Yes.
And learn. You have to learn. Yeah. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, but
no, you're right. We have to learn, and we have to allow ourselves to be uncomfortable. Right?
Yes.
That is the thing.
Oops. Oh, lost him.
that's the thing that I think.
There you are.
I must. Okay, most people are not willing to allow themselves to be uncomfortable. You just gotta just go through it, because it's not gonna feel good initially, and you're gonna, especially if you're questioning, values and beliefs and all that stuff. But allow yourself to be uncomfortable, and allow yourself to realize that we are all transitioning every day, and that includes in our thoughts in our mind. And as far as if there's someone out there who is considering transitioning, I would start with, if you have access to your healthcare, to a mental health therapist, that is the first place to start, and ask the question of, are they affirming? Are they LGBTQIA plus? The T being important. Are they affirming and friendly? Because the last thing you want to happen is to go to a therapist who is not affirming, and that could be a detrimental experience. And then secondly, allow yourself to be, right? Just allow yourself to be whatever that is, whoever that is, however that is, and know that you are loved in whatever the outcome is, whatever decision you make. There is no wrong decision. Whatever you decide is what you came to this earth to decide and live.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Dr. Elijah. We love you. I mean, I adore you. I have learned so much from you, and I will continue to learn from you. Please, everyone, go check out 100 Black Trans Men Inc. And if you could share, how could we find a copy of Mandoodle? Where's my copy? It's around here somewhere.
Yes. Amazon.com. You can see it right over my shoulder.
Right over your shoulder, right there.
Amazon.com is the best place to get it. You can get Madoodle the New Kid, and Madoodle Says Bonjour.
Madoodle. I said Mandoodle. It's not Mandoodle.
Oh, that's okay. People pronounce it in a bunch of different ways. That's totally okay.
Old McDoodle had a farm.
Yep, E-I-E-I-O.
That's
but
right.
That'll be amazing. And if you want an autograph copy, you can message me directly. You can go to my website, ElijahNicholas.com, and I'll be sure to sign a copy and send it out to you.
Okay. Awesome.
Make sure you reach out to us and let us know if there's anything we can do to support you, to support 100 Black trans men. And if anybody has any questions for you, Dr. Elijah is very active on Instagram.
Yes.
He's active on LinkedIn. And I think you're on Facebook.
I'm on Facebook. I'm everywhere. Dr. Elijah Nicholas everywhere.
Yeah.
And 100 Black
trans men. He is happy to connect. And any question, no kidding. I've asked him all of them. And he is willing to answer any question. I really appreciate you being honest, for trusting us to take care of you. I can imagine that trust is a thing that is not easy to come by today with everything that's happening.
Yeah, it's tough. It is. I appreciate y'all so much. I'm grateful for y'all having me.
We ran over time, but that's normal for us.
That's all good.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on The Edge.
Thank you.
Bye, all.